Right. Hey guys, afternoon. Thanks again for joining me on a Sunday afternoon during or after the Formula One. I'm not sure, but yeah, thanks guys for taking out the time. Really appreciate it. And yeah, today we actually have Michael van Schalkwyk with us. Michael was the winner from last year's Microsoft Excel South African Championships, and he also traveled to Vegas to participate there and to represent the country from an Excel esports perspective. So welcome, Michael. Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, no, thanks for having me. It's an honor to be here, and I'm looking forward to it.
Great. And then, as always, I've got Steyn and Jason, who's part of the case design team with me. We basically run the competition operationally, and yeah, we had a doozy of a case this week by Steyn. The case was called Warring Nations, and basically it's a case that's built around a war that a bunch of fictitious nations are having, and you need to basically help resolve the outcome of the battles. That's basically the intro to it. We also had another introduction video that I'll tag at the bottom of this case as well if you want to watch the video, that basically just talks through and walks through what the case is about and what all the rules are. And I think this case, the big thing was that this case basically tested how good of a modeler are you. Not necessarily how many functions and formulas you know, not necessarily how many lambdas you've got in your pocket, or how good you are at VBA. It's basically just how well can you control mass amounts of data. And in the end, if you unpack it and if you spend some time around it, it's actually not that much data, but the logic to bring the logic across in your formulas, I think is the challenge here. I think for the experienced modelers, they found it challenging but possible. I don't think it was possible to get all the levels out in half an hour's time. And as we've explained previously, the idea is to challenge even the most advanced modeler like a DIM. And DIM, again, said he felt challenged. But to also make it simple enough so that most people would be able to get level 1 and 2 out, maybe even level 3. And I think you can feel quite accomplished if you got level 3 and a couple of bonus questions out during this case. I think the highest score that I saw was around, the highest local score from a South African was around 400 or 500, if I remember correctly, which is a fairly low score. But yeah, we had a bunch of guys that were very close to one another. And Michael, you the results aren't out yet, but I think you were in the top 5 definitely. So nice. I think you also did pretty well. And the principle behind this recording is basically just to walk through how we attempted it, what are some of the tips and tricks that we can share from our experience, and what do we think in the end was the best way to structure this? Because I think this case was all about structure. If you had good structure, if you could quickly structure your answer, I think that was the only way to do well during this case. All right, happy. Did I miss something, guys? Do you want to add anything, or can we start sharing the case?
I think spot on, yeah. Steyn, thanks for challenging us.
Welcome. Well, I just want to share the case first. This is what the case looked like. I think I'm sharing the correct screen now. No,
this is your case.
Yeah, this is what the case looked like. So just to talk through that quickly, the case consisted of 6 levels with 5 bonus questions, and as you can see, there's a lot of information around how the case is structured. And exactly what all the rules are. So basically, you had to calculate military power score, levels 1 and 2. Levels 3, basically, you had to determine an effectiveness score, and the effectiveness basically got you to how effective the attack was or the defense was. Then there was attack sequences that were brought in, and that was controlled with the roles, and we'll show that a bit later as well. Then you basically compared two different attacks from an attacker, and based on that, there's an outcome, and the outcome can either be strong, stalemate, or defeat. Strong attack, stalemate, or defeat. And then basically, in the end, we had a principle of casualties and replenishment of troops, and then lastly, there was a factor of morale that came into it. So very much accurate if you think about like battle scenarios and stuff. And I think a very interesting case. Then, like I said, 5 bonus questions, and then we had 6 different levels of difficulty. So maybe we can start with level 1. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe let me not do all the talking. Maybe Jason, you can talk us through level 1.
Yeah, sure. Level 1, I think, just giving you an understanding of how to calculate the military power score by looking up a nation. And so I don't know if let me take over the screen sharing here. This one. And so level 1 asked us to calculate the military power score for the nation that was given in column H. The military power score, you were given number of units across infantry, vehicles, jets, and ships. And the military power score, MPS value, 1 for infantry, 35 for vehicles, 333 for jets, and 498 for ships. And if you went across to the nations tab, you had the name of the nation, you had how many infantry, vehicles, jets, and ships they had, and then you could calculate a military score. So I did this with a sum product off the bat, basically taking the range of the number, the various different unit types, and then in case N90 in the case tab, I'll just go across there. N90, sorry, here we go. Sorry, I did a transpose of those MPS values. So basically, sum product of the number of units and the MPS score for each of the units. And so sum product saying, let's just check what's infantry here. 180,000 times 1, and then 35 times 10,692, etc., and then summing those up, and that gives me the MPS for Vernier of 821,019, and I just did an XLOOKUP on that to get the ultimate answers in. I think I did it manually, sort of line by line when I was doing the testing initially. But on the nations tab, you could just use a sum product directly to get the MPS per nation, starting MPS. And I guess the starting point here important, because as soon as you get into the first battle, all of this starts to change. And so actually we'll see as we get through to levels 3 to 6 that building this MPS score out into more of a model became much more helpful than trying to do calculations directly on this tab.
I think, yeah, just a couple of observations. I think we did very similar things. One of the things that I saw that you also did was you made them tables. You made that MPS value, that reference table, you made it a table, gave it a name. That makes the referencing a lot simpler, means you don't need to lock things down as much. So when you're referring to things, you don't have to worry about your rows automatically moving around with your formulas and your functions. It makes it simpler and quicker to refer to. I think you explained the sum product well. Something that I saw and something that I learned from Steyn was basically building this information out on the nations table. So you could have added. So I also created a table on the nations table, but the nations table I actually built out, and I added more columns to the right of that, which basically had infantry, vehicles, jets, ships, but the MPS scores laid out there. Yes, and as well as the total MPS. So that means level 1, I could just look up column J on my screen instead of needing to do the whole calculation and then needing to do the whole calculation again in level 2 and again in level 3, etc. So you had something base to build off of. I think in a case like this, it was definitely beneficial. If you started well, you could have built every single level on the same. You could have built onto the same model continuously. You didn't have to do every level separate, and I think that was the most effective way to do this. Yeah, so just a couple of thoughts. I don't know, do you guys have any other things that you want to add to level 1?
No, I did it exactly the same. Also calculated it on the nation sheet and then just XLOOKUP to bring it in. How future ready that was, yeah, I mean, that remained to be seen, but at the time it made the most sense.
Yeah. Cool. Yeah, okay, so I guess we can move on to level 2 then. So
I guess you could clap bonus 1 now.
Yes.
You know, in the context of the game, you would have seen bonus A relates to level 1. So once you've calculated that highest military power score, you could have got this out, especially if you did the calculation for all of the nations on the nations tab, rather than just solving it like I was doing initially here. I think I actually did it that way around. I think I solved it on the sheet here to start with, just to get level 1 out, and then realized I should have just calculated them all. So I did the calculation here. And then to get the nation with the highest starting MPS, I think we've seen this technique a fair amount. Do an XLOOKUP of a really big number like 10 to the 10, and then look up that value in the MPS column of the nations table that I named, that Renier mentioned. Return the name and just do a match mode of exact match or next
smaller.
Biggest, is it?
Next smaller, yeah.
Next exact match or next smaller item, yeah.
Yes.
Oh yes, of course, we're coming down, yeah. So put a -1 in that match mode, and then basically it's looking for 10 to the power 10, which is an astronomically big number that's not going to feature, and then get the next smallest number, which is the biggest number in the data set, and that gave level 1 and bonus A pretty quickly, I think.
Just something to add to what I saw. I also used transpose, but interestingly enough, Eric Ashton, he shared his recording with me personally, and Eric Ashton actually used 2-row. So very interesting. I've never thought about actually using, instead of transpose, you could use 2-row. Might be quicker.
Cool.
So yeah, just something to just highlight there. I've never thought of doing that, right? So, but yeah, just an interesting thing to call out.
The bane of the translate function that came in is that transpose is now second on the list.
How many times? How many times? So I think 2-row is quicker if you have a one-dimensional array. So if you only have a row or a column, basically. All right. Otherwise, 2-row won't transpose 2 columns correctly. It would basically put them all in 1 row. So wouldn't have the same outcome. Yeah. So I think we've covered level 1. Then if we look at level 2, I don't know. Maybe Steyn, you want to take us through your level 2?
Okay. Yeah, I did, like Renier mentioned, where I built out the model and could use a single model for all of it. So I calculated basically for all the nations, or for the nation, I calculated the ground attack, the ship attack, air attack for both nations. And then it was just a matter of, based on the attack type, identifying what value I should use. So here you can see, when I pull through the attacks, I use a text before, that way I get ground, air, or ship, so that I have, because I need to use the jets value for all of the air attack, and then I just put it in a data table and pull it into the question or the answers.
Oh, that's very clever. So level 2 is basically asking, calculate the military power score of the units participating in the attacker's first attack. So the extra element that comes in here is you still use the MPS, still the same logic as level 1, but now you have to actually know, and maybe I'll just quickly share that table as well. But you have to actually know. sorry, share the right screen here. You have to know which kind of infantry or what kind of unit is involved in what kind of attack. But firstly, you need to determine what the first attack was. And from that, you basically could just look up Valtoria on the order sheet. So if I wanted to, I could just, if I wanted to do it manually, I could do it like that, or I could just apply a filter on top of this, Control-Shift-L, look for Valtoria. So there's a way to quickly validate what I'm doing. I think what's important for especially the newer people participating as well, use the example to your advantage, because the example is telling you exactly step by step what you need to do. Sometimes it does have some tips in it, and it basically shows you exactly how the calculation is being done as well. So very helpful. But ground attack basically tells me that from an attacker, so I just need to look at the first attack, and I just need to look at the attacker. So basically, I'm just looking at these two columns and determining the first attack first. So from an X lookup back to the orders table on the aggressor nation, because X lookup or V lookup would basically return the first value anyway, which would be the first attack. So no logic needed there. And then once you have that attack, you just match it back to this table. So it's basically another lookup. And then you need to look at infantry and vehicles. Now, what I did was I didn't necessarily have. I've got so many things open. I didn't necessarily have the pre-knowledge that Steyn had. So I basically built out level 2 on this main screen. And firstly, like I said, I did an X lookup. Then from that, looked it back up into this table to get the units that are involved. And then I did another index match, basically, and I matched both column and row back to nations. So in order to do that for nations, I had to basically name the already calculated MPS scores, and I had to name them infantry, vehicles, jets, and ship. I think back then it was still ship on the model, so we made everything consistent so that your lookups don't fail. But basically, I could look it back up with an index match for both column and row based on the nation and the type of unit, and then did a sum of that. So yeah, that was my level 2, and that was basically how to calculate that. So not very difficult, because in the end it's just lookups. It's just multiple lookups, but it could be intricate if your setup isn't in place. Michael, Jason, did you want to add anything to that? Maybe a different methodology that you used?
I did almost exactly the same thing, to be honest. So it was also just built it out on the main sheet itself, and also just did that kind of 2-dimensional index match. I think this one, so I mean, for level 2, because you're always dealing with the first attack, the order of attack didn't really come into play yet. That comes in the subsequent questions. And how you figure out that order, I just realized now on the call, there's actually a much simpler way to do it. I'd really built that out. So I ended up with 2 quite big tables, really simple formula. But I realized now you can actually just figure that out using a filter.
Hold on. Jason, did you have anything to add to level 2?
I'll show it just for the sake of something slightly different, but a very similar approach, built it out on the sheet directly, looked up ground attack. I just pulled in attacker and defender values because I knew I was gonna sort of need them later, but I only focused on the attacker to start with. But I actually pulled in infantry, vehicles, jets, and ships for the nation that we're looking up for, Valtoria here. So looked up Valtoria and pulled in all of those. I guess a nice thing to know is that when you do an X lookup on, look for the name in the T nations table, you can return a range. So you can return 4 columns at the same time. That's, I suppose, quite useful. But I pulled in all of them. And then to figure out which ones to use, I did an is number X match of the attacker units that were put down, infantry and vehicles, against the headers, infantry, vehicles, jets, and ships. And so if you can match, so X match is just telling you what position infantry is in this range. And if it's finding it, it's going to give you a 1, 2, 3, or a 4. And if it can't find it, it's going to give you a value error. And so if that is a number, that's going to give you a true, and then you can multiply by the 135, 333, 498 MPS score. And so basically what that's doing is it's just zeroing out my jets and ships, and then I could just sum all 4 up, because my jets and ships were basically zeroed out. And I actually found that helped me going forward in levels 3 to 6, because I didn't have to sort of dynamically pull in which units were being used. I could just pull in 4 standard rows or 4 standard columns and just zero out the ones that weren't necessary. So for example, on an air attack, air versus infantry, I only have jets, and so the rest are zeroed out. And a slightly different way, but nice to know that, the different approach to zero things out and then just sum it up straight.
Interesting note there. True always equates to 1, and false always equates to 0. And that's why if you multiply by true, you're actually multiplying by 1. If you're multiplying by false, you're multiplying by 0, and that zeroes it out.
Yeah, so I'm evaluating true, true, false, false, which is 1, 1, 0, 0. And so I've got 164,900 times 1, 996 times 1, 495 times 0, 168 times 0. And that's what I'm getting here.
Excel is clever enough to know that true needs to become 1 in a multiplication instance. Otherwise, if you went n of true or double dash of true or value of true, it would always equate to 1. So yeah, but I guess we've made that known. Okay, so we can step on to level 3 then, I guess.
Yep.
You want to quickly just show level 3, Jason, and then maybe Michael can take us through his solution.
Sure. Yeah, so level 3 was, so we brought in the concept of a strong attack, a stalemate, or a defeat here, which Renier sort of preempted at the start in the instructions. But basically, if the aggressor wins both of the battles, and we'll get into that in a second, that's a strong attack. If the aggressor wins 1 and the besieged wins 1, it's a stalemate. And if the besieged wins both, then it's a defeat. And so you had to figure out across 2 attacks who won each of them, and then come up with the strong attack or defeat or stalemate. Michael, do you want to take us through what you did?
Yeah, sure. So for this one, when I get a question like this that's a bit more complicated, I like just creating a separate sheet. Ultimately, I'll end up using a data table to kind of run my solution through each of the different inputs. So I always just start with an index, set that to 1. I then just index over these values themselves, so all these different inputs. So there, okay, 2 would be the blank line, but index of 1 would be the example, and then 3 would be the first question, etc., etc. Then from there, I then just read out each of the countries that are involved. So we've got our aggressor is always in this top row. The besieged nation is then at the bottom. And yeah, I suppose one of the next kind of aspects you then needed to bring in is the whole question around the roles. So there's a different sheet with roles, and you then have a roll number. And for question 3, you've then got your starting roll. For this battle was 468. So what I did there was I just did a filter on column A and B in the roll sheet. And I've then got two conditions, both of them and applying with an and I just filtered where the number of the rolls greater than equal to whatever the question has, and it's then less than that plus 4. And what that did was that then quite nicely just brings out that little snapshot from the roll sheet. So we've got the rolls there. I then just had a look. The question had a bit of quite a detailed example. So I used this, kept coming back to this to just calibrate, which numbers go where. Because, for example, this first roll would obviously go for the aggressor, but you then had the second roll on that list then goes for the first roll of the besieged, which I suppose makes sense because you're going aggressor besieged. So I just put those in order up here. I then copied over what I'd done for question 2. So what was this, question 2 or question? Yeah, I think it was question 2. So I copied this over where I was then just going for a given country. What do we bring in or how do we calculate the MPS? For question 3, I think question 3 was still just on the first roll, if I'm not mistaken. Was it question 4 that brought in?
It was the first.
orders?
It was the first battle. So basically, it was
Right.
It was basically the first two attacks.
Okay.
And I think just something to highlight there, the way that you did it works perfectly because there can only be there can only be up to 2 different units involved in an attack or a defense. So that was also a nice one because otherwise you had to allow for expansion or contraction. In this case, you always had at least 2 things that you had to bring back. But in air attacks, you only had 1, and you had to deal with the word none, which was something else to deal with.
So look, the way I dealt with that was very crude. I just said if error around the lookup. So if none went in there, couldn't find it in the lookup, and then it just mapped it to 0.
Just a quick note on the XLOOKUP there. I think you could use is the 4th or 5th argument inside XLOOKUP, where it's like if not found, basically.
If error. Yeah.
Yeah.
So you're saying you could basically have just
you could have done comma 0 without the if error in theory, yeah.
Yeah. No, fair enough. Okay, so
but always you do what you're comfortable with, right? So so if that doesn't take you any more time, no worries, right? So but in future, that's where if you have a lot of practice, you basically find a way to do things. And if error works for you, then it works for you, man.
Yeah. Look, I kind of default to if error because the thing is, if I'm using other functions that don't have that, you might have like a VLOOKUP or something else. So I kind of default to if error just out of caution, I guess.
It's funny because that I think is a good thing to do because XMatch doesn't have the if not found argument, whereas XLOOKUP does. And whenever I do an XMatch, I find myself wanting to, and I spend a couple of seconds trying to find where to put the comma 0, and then realize I can't, and then have to wrap it in if error.
Yeah, so then from the MPS, I then just built up. So this is now where we get to the calculation itself, where we've got. If you'll have your MPS, you'll have the number that you rolled, which would split out into that table, and then the effective score is then just 40% of your MPS plus 60% of your MPS times your roll. So I built that out in the table here. Added in another column that then just checks. And at this point, I wasn't sure if you could have a draw, so I just allowed for that in this equation here. But here you're just checking, is the attacking nation, are they winning, losing, or drawing? And then at the bottom here, I just created a little summary table that then feeds into a statement that says if the aggressor won 2, it's a strong attack. If they won 1, it's a stalemate, otherwise it's a defeat. And then put that in a data table. And 2, this was kind of a nonsense output because this would have been blank. I mean, this is where it's pulling between the example and the actual question itself. But anyway, then just copied from there down, and that was it.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I think very similar. Steyn, sorry, did you want to add something?
Yeah, no, I just want to mention something on the 4 rolls. The first 2 belong to the attacker and not alternating.
Yeah, so the first two rolls had to be on the attacker actually. So it was also in the rules a bit later. So
okay.
So the way that you,
so that maybe
the way
went
that-
wrong there. This should have been
Yeah,
transposed then.
yes, correct.
Okay, right.
Yeah, so I just want to see quickly how I did that. Yeah, I just wanted to show maybe. I did level 3 and 4 in one, because the big thing is our level 4. So level 3 didn't exist until like the last day. We actually put level 3 in just so that there's an intermediate step. Otherwise, level 4 would have been a lot more difficult, and you could have gone wrong applying the because level 4 basically just built out the casualties. So what we did was, so that's why what I tend to do when there's a lot of information or when there's a big example, I would actually paste it on. I would paste it across to a new sheet so that I have less noise, and then I would add my own more noise. So I would put my column lookup somewhere around here, and then I would build out my function like this. So very similar to what you did. I just basically decided from the get-go that I was going to transpose it, so or to call it instead of, so the way that it was given was actually going across. So you had your role. So this is game 41 because it was one of the scenarios that I was testing. So I like your sequence. I like your sequence method because it might actually be a little bit faster, or your index. Sorry, your index method. It might be faster, but if you need to go back and you need to like refer to specific games, then it might take you long to figure out what game am I referring to. But yeah, I transposed the information across, and then I looked it up back to nations where I built out the numbers in the MPS. The same logic, like we said, from level 2, copied those things across so that I had what units I used, etc., and then determined MPS applied through this as well. I think the other difficulty that was built into this was that when you are attacking, you basically attack with, if you're attacking with jets, you basically only apply the jets' MPS to the strength of the attack. So your MPS applied, you have to determine if it's jets. So basically, I just said if the first units used is jets, then apply just the sum of the first value, and then the roles. How I brought that back was I did an offset. So instead of a filter, I basically indexed the roles, brought back the corresponding roll number, the first roll number, and then with an offset brought back the 4 down. So I think that was maybe a little bit faster logic. And then I manually said the first 2 to the attacker, the second 2 to the defender, and that was part of the rules, part of the video as well. So it was basically explained over here where attacker roll 1, attacker roll 2, defender roll 1, defender roll 2. So that's the order in the rolls. So that's why I did this, and then I basically determined my defeat or win with just an if, like you did it. But I made them numbers so that I could then determine my outcome with a switch. And I basically said if it's a 2, so switch is like an ifs. That's basically evaluating the sum of the 2 games as outcomes. And then if it's a 2, it's a strong attack. If it's a 1, it's a stalemate, or a 0, it's a defeat. So I think there's maybe just a little bit faster logic. So I guess I just wanted to show that this portion was level 4 onwards, and then I've got 2 different data tables. The one is for levels 41 to 60, and for levels 61 to 80. So I think helpful to show that you can actually have multiple levels solved in one model. If your model is good enough, and this model in my mind wasn't good enough. That's why I built a new model for level 5 and 6, because I realized I could improve upon it. So I basically threw out this, and I want to urge every viewer that wants to practice this a lot more, to find your own way, but to try this again, try this case again under no time pressure. Attempted. I had one of the ladies that reached out to me. She said she couldn't upload her model on time because it was too large, and I said too large. So she sent it to me, and it was 22 megs. And I was like, "How the hell did you get it to 22 megs?" And she said she doesn't know. And I realized when I looked at it, I realized she was just under time pressure, and she ended up copying a function across 2 sheets, all the way down to the millionth row, 1,048,000. So she went all the way down to 1,048,576. And something like that could cost you around, because now what's going to happen is as soon as you save that and you don't know where you went wrong, your Excel becomes a lot slower, a lot more inefficient. You start losing time, you start bleeding time. So I also told her, go back, try it again under no time pressure, look at the way that you build out your model, try and do it again. And what was helpful for me was, this was my level 3 and 4, but level 5 was different. And level 5 was good enough so that level 6, I could just copy paste over. So from level 5 to level 6, you can actually be only 3 or 5 minutes away until you actually have level 6 out. And that's what you want to get to. You want to find a way so that your model can be built so well. A guy like Dim, I think he got to level 5, and I think the first 4 bonus questions in the time. And I mean, you can only do that with proper experience and practice. The only way that you're going to get there is to sit and struggle with it, try it, think about how you can improve it. And I mean, if I think about how Steyn built it, Steyn built everything on 1 line. I built everything over 2 lines. So for me, I like being able to see my whole model, see everything in one screen. But it's not always the most effective, because now building that out into level 5, now I start producing a lot of lines. When I get to level 6, I start producing a hell of a lot of lines. Now the question is it good to have more lines and less columns, more rows, less columns, or not? And that depends on you. It's a preference thing. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Was there anything else that we wanted to share on level 3, guys?
Well, one thing I did to bring in my roles, I did a sequence on it. So I did a sequence of 4 starting at my starting number, and I just used that in a X lookup to bring back the roles.
That's maybe even simpler than offset, because you don't have to understand offset. You can just use index, or you can use X lookup, like you said. Good call. Right, can we move on to level 4? Okay, so level 4, just to maybe explain, level 4 added the casualties. So we're still on the first battle, but now we just want to determine casualties, and we want to then get the military power score after casualties have been applied. The principle of casualties is explained in the example, and the example is large, but the only reason why it's large is because we want to make it as easy as possible for someone to follow their logic. It's step by step telling you exactly what we calculated through, which roles matched with which entities or countries or nations, what the outcome was, what the actual effective score was, how it was calculated. So it's showing you every single working, and that's why it's important for me. Sometimes I don't even go and read the instructions. If you've watched the video, and you could have watched the video 10 times if you wanted to, and make notes, because the video doesn't start the time, and the principle is then you can start with a question and just try and apply what you've just read or what you've just heard, and then follow your examples and try and get to the same outcome. And if you get to the same outcome, you know that you can trust, and then you even have the game hints that tells you that the answers between, and we made it very tight, because there's 1,000 numbers, or there's 999 numbers between the two. You knew that you were in at least 1,000. So if you got it wrong, that's unlucky, but the validation was basically also there. So yeah, the only thing that we added there basically was or that Steyn added there was based on the outcome of the attack. How many units does the attacker and the defender lose percentage-wise? And basically the important thing there, again, like we said, air attacks only use jets for the attacker's strength. So for the determining of determining whether it's a strong attack, a stalemate, or a defeat. Jets are only used for calculate or for determining that, but then depending on the target, an air attack will also inflict casualties on the defender's non-air units. So if you have a attack where it's a jets or air versus infantry, you're only applying jets to the comparison of the effective score, but for the calculation of the casualties, you have to determine that on both jets and infantry. On the defender side, because the attacker is only using jets, they can only lose jets. So very logical, but difficult to model, right? And again, not that difficult, but difficult to model. And that's what we were testing here, basically, is how good can you model, how quickly, and how effective can you work. Yeah, so I don't know, is there someone that want to take this one? I don't know, maybe Jason. I think it's your turn. I'm doing too much talking.
Yeah, happy. I think your level 3, you sort of touched on closing out level 4 as well. But I'll show you what I did. It sounds like I had a pretty similar layout to Steyn by the looks of it. So it's also same as Michael and Renier and Steyn, I think, moved on to a new sheet for level 3. So built out level 1 and 2 in the sheet. I think as Renier said, with this case, you could have actually just built one model and answered from level 1 to level 6 if you wanted to. You can see I did level 3 to level 6 in one sheet, and I've got the data tables for 3, 4, 5, and 6 and bonus D down here. But that was with the benefit of hindsight and 2020 vision, having tested the case, and then going through and sort of, this was the final thing that I came up with after knowing what the case was all about. It definitely didn't look like this to start with, but yeah. So I think Renier has spoken through basically everywhere of getting the infantry, the units in based on the attack type, here, and the units that are in the attack type. I've spoken through how I zeroed out what we wanted. I built in the logic up at the top here to look if there were jets in the attack, that my besieged nation only used jets in its MPS calculation, the rolls, the effective score that Michael spoke through. I did a very similar thing to Renier on outputting I did a 1 and a 2 rather than a 0 and a 1, but then summed that up. And then different to you, Renier, I didn't do a switch, which I think is a cool idea as well. I just typed 2, 3, and 4 next to the table here, because if for me player 1 winning was a 1 and player 2 winning was a 2, so if player 1 won twice, it would be a 2. If player 1 once and 1 once and player 2 won once, it would be a 3. And if player 2 won twice, it would be a 4. And so I just did an X lookup on 2, 3, or 4 versus that, which was quite useful. And now we're pulling in the losses here for level 4. So the losses were given in the table. So level 3, you've calculated strong attack, stalemate, or defeat. So same logic. And then you're just pulling in attacker losses and defender losses at that point. So I just did an X lookup on strong attack, which we've had to calculate previously, on attack strength. And again, I pulled in 2 columns, attacker losses and defender losses, because that was useful for my model. Ignore morale for now. We'll get there in a second. So once you've got these losses calculated, then I went to the start of the next line, because this was effectively going to be the starting point for attack number 2, so my answer for level 4 was pulling the second row, because that's the end of the first battle, if that makes sense to you. But let's just go through example 4. We've got a ground attack with infantry and vehicles. So we're doing damage to infantry and vehicles. And so the previous number of units, and this is, I think, important in the context of calculating the MPS, your losses are happening on the number of units. And you're losing 4% of the units that were involved in the battle, so infantry and vehicles. Again, I did a similar logic to what I did previously. If you can find infantry in what one of the 2 units were that were being part of the attack, then it's going to give me a 1, otherwise it's true and otherwise a false. And so this is how I was multiplying either the lookup percentage that's being reduced to 4%, multiplying that by either a true or a false. So 1 minus 4% if true, otherwise 1 minus 0 if false. So that means my jets and my ships don't lose anything, even though they're referencing the 4%. And this, Renier, I think is kind of what you were alluding to at the beginning. This was more a modeling setup. It was just sort of using logic of ifs, of trues and falses, ones and zeros, so that I could apply a consistent formula. I wonder if this will show up nicely on the screen. This is a formula mapping. So basically what this brown means is that this formula is a single formula copied all the way down. And so one formula to copy down to solve all of the battles that could occur. And I think Steyn gave us about 50 battles in that orders sheet per nation. And so by the end, again, benefit of hindsight and 20/20 vision and whatever the case is, I could build it in one line and copy down, and then I had my solution. The one sort of nuance I'll call out, just because it was something we realized just as the round was starting. Steyn's instructions said that if you lose part of a unit, then you keep that unit. I think that's the way around. You keep the unit. If you lost part of a unit, then you keep the unit. Whereas I think in the video we said you round up the loss, and so that would be it would be off by 1. So we actually built into the checking on FlexiQuiz that will accept both directions, and we calculated if you round it up or round it down on this step, just sort of as a side note. But effectively, you take 4% off of infantry and vehicles. In this case, you can see these ones are coming down, jets and ships not changing, and then calculating the MPS score of these multiplied by the MPS value of each of them. And I then ran a data table across games 61 to 80 to get the answer.
Awesome. I like the way that you structured it. And I think one of the things that I remember struggling with when I built it out the first time was, I mean, level 3 and 4 didn't allow me. I didn't allow enough, or level 3's model didn't allow enough room to calculate the MPS at the end, because I was only working with the units that were in the battle. And then I realized, okay, but I need to bring back that information. And once you get to that, it's basically one of those things where my model wasn't designed with scale in mind. And I think I said that in the video as well, as when you design with scale in mind, and I think this is a perfect example of something that was designed for scale, because you keep all data points alive during your model. And then that's something that Steyn also does, is all the data points are available. So if I now pivot the question and I ask the question in a different way, you don't necessarily need to adapt your whole model or remodel in order to get to your answer. And I think that flows perfectly into level 5. I just want to look at the bonuses again. Okay, so when we look at the bonuses, level 5 and 6 was basically bonus D and E. So you could have done bonus B and C separately. So bonus B and C. I see bonus 2 and bonus 3 you also did together, Jason. So and I think they could have also been done in a similar vein. So I don't know if you want to quickly just show that while you are showing the screen. Maybe
Yeah.
show your sheet.
Yeah, sure. So I did them both on the same sheet, although sort of somewhat independently. But bonus B asked which nation participated in the greatest number of battles across levels 2 to 6, excluding examples. This is a pretty common setup for a bonus question, pulling out all of the inputs across levels 2 to 6, excluding examples, and then calculating the one that did the best or participated in the most. So I did a V stack of the sort of each. This is level 2, level 3, level 4, level 5. I put that in a 2-col just to get one long column, because the inputs from level 3 onwards have got, you know, a 2D array rather than a 1D array. So I put that in a 2-column just to get, so basically I've got a long list of all of the nations mentioned across levels 2 to level 6. And then I did a group by here. So I grouped this by count A. So basically count the number of times you see the thing. And the sort order, if you do positive numbers, it's going ascending, minus is going descending. And because I've got a 2D output or 2-column output, -2 is sorting the second column in descending order. And so that's giving me the list of the times that these entities were mentioned. Entities. Talk about accounting here. The number of times that these nations were mentioned in descending order based on the count, the second column. And then I could just basically pull in the first. What did I do? I think I literally just clicked on C1. Yeah, I just clicked on
that's
C1.
perfect. And
Yeah.
I think just something to note there was your 2-col had a second, or had another parameter there that excluded errors. So that just cleans up the data for you. So the third option excludes blanks, errors, and something else. I can't remember. And then the blanks and
Getting
errors.
all blanks or errors, or blanks and errors.
Yeah. So it's the blanks and errors. And then I like the group by function. This shows everyone how to do this by like ground principles. But a lot of participants I know have developed something that they call most of, or are using a lambda called most of. That basically does exactly this, where you could have just added everything in the V stack and said most of, and it would basically give you the group by, give you and sorted also in descending order. So just something to note there. And then bonus 3.
Still got to get on the lambda train.
yeah, we still have to. When we have time, somewhere in the future.
Okay, then bonus 3 asked quite a cool question, I thought, from Steyn. Which is the only nation that launched a retaliatory attack against the nation that had attacked it in a previous level? And so this is a bit of a very case-specific question, right? So basically, if you go to level 3, for example, you've got Thermora attacking Ellendor, and you've got Norvesa attacking Pyrena. And then in level 4, you've got Thermora attacking Ellendor and whatever. So actually level 3 and 4 is not a good example, because we had the same data. But in level 5, you had different names sort of doing attacks here. And so what this was asking is, where did someone attack? And maybe it's easiest for me to show the actual answer here. So where did Thermidor, I should probably do this one. Where did Thermidor attack Ellendor, where Ellendor attacked Thermodon or whatever? And you can see here, Ellendor attacked Thermodon in the previous round, and then Thermodon attacked Ellendor in this round. And so really the question is, how did you do that? And this was level 3, level 4, level 5, level 6. And so what I did was look up the attacking nation in the previous battle's besieged nation, return the attacking nation of the previous battle, and check if that's the same as the besieged nation in this round. And so Thermodon is going to be one of the besieged nations in this previous round. It's going to pick up Elendor as the nation that attacked it, and then it's going to check if that's the same nation that it is attacking, and then it's going to give me trues and falses. And I just did a bit of a data validation for sense check for myself, and then I found the true and pulled in the true value for Thermodon here, which I think is the answer. Is it Thermodon or the other one? Yeah, Thermodon. Yeah.
Yeah, Jason, I must say I also like adding conditional formatting sometimes, whether it's on values or numbers or something, just to kind of get a feel for how things look or where a maximum or a minimum is or something like that. So I find that very handy.
Yeah, and this is probably it's probably like slightly inefficient from a exam technique perspective, but just the way that the brain works for me, it's like I just want to be able to visualize that this is right. It's just sort of the same principle as coloring in these headers here. Like if you were really trying to save milliseconds, you probably wouldn't be doing that. But like for me, it just helps me to structure the thinking a bit in the moment.
Even just having it bold is a lot better than having no bold, because you know where your headings are, and sometimes I even use freeze panes. Is it freeze panes?
Yeah.
Where it at least stays consistent, so that when I scroll up and down, I know which column I'm referring to if I'm building a large model running down. Just for interest's sake, I did exactly what you did, Jason. But I put everything next to one another running down in one sequence, and then I could do an is number X match on the inverse.
Okay.
So I basically X matched the inverse of those, and saw where I found true, and then also used conditional formatting, because that takes milliseconds. And just for my brain to know that this was the attacker, this was the besieged. And in this case, the besieged was the attacker. So I knew which. Otherwise, you could have swapped them around. You could have said Elendor is the answer. And actually, the answer should have been Thermodon. So again, the brain works like that. But interesting how we did it in the same vein, or in the same way. All right. So let's get to level 5. Steyn, you want to maybe take us through your level 5?
Okay.
So while you're finding it, level 5 was asking you to determine the military power score after the first 5 attacks. So basically, the only intricacy that was introduced from level 4 was now it's not just one attack. You have to repeat the same logic 5 times. So if you had built your model perfectly, you could have copied down the function and you're done. And that's the trick. So what did you have to have there? You had to have cells locked and rows locked in the right way. So if you're referring to reference data at the top, like in this case K3 to N3, if you're referring to that data and you didn't lock your reference and you copy down the function, you're copying it down incorrectly and your results don't make sense. And then you need to go into like trying to figure out where did I go wrong. And you need to like step cell by cell by cell, and that is because you applied poor principles from, if we're talking about ground principles from a modeling perspective, you are killing time at the end. So building it well from the get-go with maybe named references or locked cells or tabular references would actually pay off a lot of dividends in the end. Sorry, go for it, Steyn.
Yeah. So going from the previous question, we calculate the losses after the previous attack in the next round. Then it was just after the 5th attack. But if you calculate in the next round, you just need to remember to take your score on the 6th row or not on the 5th row. So you have after the 5th attack. And then I just ran a data table on it.
Yeah, I think pretty much the same as what I've Steyn. It looks like you and I ended up with very similar sort of layout. So once you got that row calculated and you could copy that down, then you always had the starting MPS per battle. And so the 6th starting MPS was the end of the 5th battle's MPS, essentially.
Yes.
Yeah. Scaling came in really nicely here.
Yeah, and I think something that that Michael was referring to earlier that you could have done as well is, so I used the filter function, and I basically filtered from on the orders table based on the nation, and this is where name tables and functions actually comes in nicely, because now looking at it afterwards, I could see what I did. I was looking at where my nation was Valtoria, which is the attacker in this case. I was filtering based on everything in the nation, on that nation, and I was taking the first 5. So my function makes a lot more sense, and then based on that, I could reference. I just had a sequence. In this case, I had a sequence of 5, but level 6, I had a sequence of the count of the orders, and I could basically just look that up with this. And again, I did mine over 2 rows, which has its drawbacks, but my benefit was I could see my whole. So I'm on a big screen. I could see my whole model in one view, and that helps me a lot, because when I need to compare or I need to start problem shooting or troubleshooting, that helps me. But I think there's a lot more intricacies that gets introduced with doing it over two rows. So if I had to build it again, I would probably also use 1 row. I think that's the better way to do it. Working working in order of what you need to do. And I think looking at Jason's example that he showed earlier, you could see level 1, you could see level 2, you could see level 3, you could see level 4, you could see how everything was being built out. And then again, data table, I think, is the best way, unless you're dim and you can write a lambda that solves the whole thing in one go. Yeah, I think that was all that level 5 had to do. And then level 5 had bonus D linked, I think D linked to it. So bonus D was asking, during level 5, which attacking nation inflicted the greatest cumulative reduction in military power score on the defending nation? In that case, for level 5, I basically just went and calculated basically just calculated. Come on, pressing F1 instead of F2. That's another thing that's wasted my time. So I basically looked at the starting MPS for Revisia, which was the defending nation in example 5, or the besieged nation, and I took the final MPS after the 5th round, and I deducted them off of each other, and just a cool trick, added them to the same data table that I had on level 5. You could do multiple columns over a data table, so then resolve the whole thing and refer to the largest answer, which was in game 98. In that case, taking it back to how do I write a function around that? Okay, I see. I just said H304. Not sure, but anyway, so you would have looked up the largest value there on level 5. So you could have used that XLOOKUP trick that Jason showed as part of bonus A. Yeah, anything,
Yeah.
Steyn, I see you want to add something.
Yeah, so what I did is I only ran one data table, and then on my answer sheet where I pasted the answers, I just did a VLOOKUP against the regional NPS score that I calculated in round 1, and then I could just deduct the regional less my answer for level 5 to get the difference.
No, that's clever. Great. So level 6, like we said, adds just one more little intricacy to it, and that is morale, and basically asking, identify the first round in which the morale of either nation reaches 0. What is the combined military power score of both nations at the end of that round? So you had to basically answer the round number separated by a dash, and then the military power score that was combined after all those rounds. So again, I literally could use exactly the logic that I had built in level 5, and I basically just copied everything down. What I had to do is I had to move my filter to the side, because now I had to allow for any number of attacks because I didn't know that it was 50 necessarily. And then I just copied down all the logic all the way down. Now the big thing is what I had to calculate is on which row do you first find 0. So your morale calculation was pretty simple. Your morale, I brought my morale table over to this as well so that I can visually verify and validate. Your morale starts on 100 for both nations, and the impact you just need to basically figure out based on the outcome. So very similar to level 4, where instead of losses, you basically just bring morale impact across and you calculate the morale. I used an ifs function to determine, and I basically said if adding these two goes more than 100 because your morale was capped at 100, couldn't go over 100, couldn't go lower than 0. So an ifs basically just determined what the value would be. If it was 100, keep it, or if it was more than 100, keep it to 100. And I know that there's a better way to doing this, but that was what made sense for me when I was there. And if it's less than 0, keep it to 0. Otherwise, if it's true, in other words, if it doesn't meet criteria 1 or 2, just add them together. And then the only thing that you had to do is you had to find a way to look up the 0 the first time that it occurs. So I used XLOOKUP for that, and basically just said look up 0 in this column, which is the morale outcome, and return for me the game number, because I had my game number there or my round. I could return the round, and that way I could get the round number quickly. Any different methodologies followed there, guys?
Yeah, very much the same from my side. I think the sort of slightly quicker way to write that ifs function that I think you are alluding to is you can achieve the same outcome with mins and maxes. So if you just add the previous morale value to what you're going to change the morale by, if you wrap that in the minimum, 100, then it'll always stop at 100. It won't go above 100. And if you wrap that in maximum, 0, it'll never go below 0. And so you only need to reference the two cells that are the previous value and the change once, and then you just wrap it in a min max, and that'll give you the hard limits up and down.
Oh, that's excellent. So I didn't necessarily have the time. I was thinking about min and max, but then I was like, I always have to either keep it to a minimum or keep it to a maximum. I've never had to keep it between, and that's why I just used the ifs, because that made sense to me. But I like that. I like that more, definitely.
Otherwise, same from my side.
One thing I just wanted to add, and I guess just to talk about bonus E. The bonus E logic basically was just asking for the game. I just want to see the game number. So which level, or I think the final question had game number in there. Which game number required the greatest number of attacks before a nation's morale reached 0? So that was very basic, because all that you had to do is you had to find the maximum outcome of this number. So the maximum round out of all of those, and the answer was 118. Which actually went up to 25 rounds in this case. And then just a final note from me. What I did was, and this is the first time I did this, but after we did this case, I thought I didn't use any difficult formulas or functions. I didn't use any lets. I didn't use any lambdas. I didn't do any like hectic stuff according to me. And I basically went and I created a formula inventory from this, and I basically tried to go and check, and I did a summary across the levels just to see what functions are we using, and you can see there that if you look at the summary, we've got roundup, we've got if, is number, x match, sum, x lookup, if error. So there's nothing there that's really complex, right? But again, just to go back to what Jason said, what was important on this case was structure. It was important that you build something that was scalable. It was important that you lock your functions, lock your formulas, so that if you're referencing something that needs to stay put, you need to lock it. And for the new guys that haven't locked many things, press F4, and basically anything with a $ ahead of it is being locked. So the first time you press F4, you'll get $2. You'll get before the column and before the row reference. And I can maybe show that while I'm doing it. So if I'm referring to K2, that's K2. K2 with F4 is $K, $2. So locking row and column. $2 means locking only a row, because I'm only locking the second row. And then pressing F4 again gives me $K, which is locking only the column. And that's a very important thing to know, because when you're starting to drag your formulas across, sometimes you want to just lock the row, but keep the column moving with your function. And sometimes you have to do the other thing. Sometimes you have to keep it static. So knowing to do that is very important in modeling, because in the end, now if it's built properly and it's built properly the first time, you can just drag all your formulas across or drag them down, and everything works like it should. So, but yeah, I don't think this was a overly complex case, but it was a lot of information, and it was asking, like, how well can you cope with a lot of information under time pressure? How well can you build a structured outcome? And building a structured outcome was the essence of this question.
Yeah, I must say from my side, one of the things I struggled with was just in the time, let's put it like that. So I mean, within 30 minutes, I really struggled with the volume of information, and the inclusions and the exclusions. Like a thing like if a jet's attacking, then it only affects the jet and things like that. So I mean, I don't think I ended up even building in that kind of intricacy. So I mean, I wonder from your side, how long do you think somebody would need to take to kind of finish this case properly, or do you guys feel like somebody could have potentially gotten it in 30 minutes, or do you think it's maybe a 40-minute case?
I mean, there's possibility in my mind. I think, like, when I was testing the case the second time, like knowing what the structure needs to look like, I think I got it out probably within half an hour. But to me, the benchmark is always like, where did the likes of you, Michael, and Adam and Dim land? That to me is a benchmark, right? And if the top sort of performers in the round are doing it are getting sort of 500 points, then to me it's a pretty clear indication that to have got this out in 30 minutes is probably unlikely. If the likes of you guys are getting it out, or getting like 1,000 out of 1,250, and it's maybe a question of could you got the last couple of bonuses out or not, there's give and take. I think that this realistically was not a 30-minute case on first read, because you were just digesting the content. But once you know the content, it all makes sense, and it seems fairly logical, and it's not difficult concepts, right? And I think on a first attempt within 30 minutes, unlikely.
Right.
So just to add to that, the important thing is we give 35 minutes. The reason why we give 35 minutes is so that people hopefully can spend half an hour, then have a moment to breathe, and maybe get one more bonus question out, and have enough time to submit their case study, to submit the actual workings, right? Because we're still using FlexiQuiz.
Yeah.
So that was the reason why we have 35 minutes. And then the other thing is, so I think a really good modeler can get it out in maybe 45 minutes or an hour. But that's also why we're sharing the video in advance, because the video was meant to show you visually and explain it to you. And you could have watched, like I said, you could have watched that video 10 times if you wanted to. And I mean, you could have also built some logic if you wanted to ahead of time, which is not really something that I would necessarily do, or that I would need to, what I would condone. If you're doing the World Championships cases or the Road to Las Vegas cases, you have 5 minutes. And in that 5 minutes, you can watch the video once, which is 2 minutes, 1 to 2 minutes. and you've got 3 minutes to think about it, and maybe quickly write a function or a formula if you wanted to, just to help you in getting started. So that's what you're able to do. So, but that's why we gave you, because if you had to read that whole page, and I mean, I'm not a good reader when it comes to like that kind of reading. If you have to read that logic and get it out, and there's no way. But I think it's possible in under an hour. And I think maybe the likes of a dim might be able to get it out in 40 minutes or 45 maybe.
Right. One other question I had. So you guys said, build your formula for each question so that it can be used for the next one. What I find myself doing is each question, I feel so kind of time strapped that I'm always just kind of solving the problem. Do you think it would have made more sense to start with one of the later questions that might have allowed you to kind of build out more of a wider, get a solid base and then use that to go back? Or what do you think would be a good strategy there?
So I think in Tango's case, right, the case was of such a nature that you could have you could have started with a level 5, for instance, if you wanted to, or even a level 7, if you're confident, maybe a level 6. But with this case, we deliberately built it, or Steyn deliberately built it so that it helps you to logically follow through. Experience would actually get you to a level where you build so that it's scalable. But if you started with a later level, you wouldn't have had the logic that you would have had to. So if you started with level 4, you needed level 3's logic to understand level 4, or to actually get to level 4. So this case was meant to build in a perfect chronological order. You shouldn't have tried to jump across. No.
Okay.
But I mean, if you did just read the ask of the later questions, it could have guided you on how you set up your model.
That's
100%.
a good point. Yeah.
Yeah. So
read later,
read ahead.
start early. Yeah.
Yeah. So read ahead, definitely. That I recommend, because I know that Dim does that. Watching some of these videos, I know that he goes and he reads at least the bonuses and understands what is expected of him in the time, and then goes and starts with level 1. I think that helps a lot. Yeah. So reading ahead, 100%, but not doing ahead in cases like this, because you will fall flat in that, because there's some ground principles that you haven't bedded down yet, and this case is meant to go from level 1 to 6 in my mind.
I suppose the other tricky thing there is also, I mean, as you're building with each level, you can calibrate your approach to the example to kind of make sure that you've at least gotten that part right.
100%.
I would sort of tentatively say that for like the average person, reading ahead is probably not realistic, because like I take myself for example. In these cases, if I solve like level 3 and level 4, that's probably where I'm landing on most of them. So even if I knew what I needed to do for level 6, like level 6 in most of the cases is like probably a 10 to 15 minute solve on its own for a lot of people. And so for me, it's probably a 30-minute solve on its own. Then I get 0 points because I've not even got level 6 out, and then I can't go backwards. So I think for like the average person, probably going step by step makes sense. But like in this case, for example, if you knew what you needed to do for like level 3 and level 4, I think you could have done level 3 and level 4 and then solved 1 and 2 off the back of that really easily, and then scaled to 5 and 6 really easily. But you only know that with hindsight, right? Every case, like the different cases don't work like that. So you got to like, do you gamble with reading ahead and wasting time and trying to get something that's scalable, where it's like, I mean, I remember a case previously, was it Pipemare or whatever, that the one guys that were trying to build out a logic for that thing failed miserably. And the rest of us that said, oh, this, I'm not going to get this out and do it manually, like scored more points. It's our case specific. And so how do you know? It really comes down to experience, I think.
Yeah. It's experience. It's just doing a bunch of these and finding a way that works for you and applying your experience.
No. Well, I mean, one last thing I'd say about this case is, there was no questions where you could kind of run between, and I don't think you could really do anything manually. So from that aspect, it was quite nice because you kind of, you know, blocked off somebody just coming in like guessing or something and maybe getting some points. You really had to kind of figure it out.
100%. And that's why we made the game hints so tight, so that you could validate your game hint because it was only within 1,000. We didn't make the range very wide because getting a random answer correct between 999 options, then you deserve the point. And then the other thing that we didn't want to basically say beforehand was that we built in anti-AI prompting into each of the cases. So,
Okay.
so I'm still
Don't
busy
give away too
auditing.
much.
I'm still busy auditing it, but there was actually, but I mean, there was actually anti-AI built into these cases as well, where there was enough that it could throw an AI, because we introduced more rules that basically could confuse an AI, or that would just tell an AI to add 99 to the answer, and you would never know that it's incorrect. But I would know because I would see that everything is. But I would see that every answer is exactly out by 99. So yeah, just something to note as well.
That's good. Yeah.
All right. But thanks, gents. I appreciate your time. Thank you for another recording, and it was wonderful having you, Michael. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks again.
Yeah, and you guys take care. We look forward to seeing all of you in the finals. Michael will probably definitely see you, hopefully. And yeah, so that would be on the 12th of September. So we've got lots of work to do until then, between myself, Steyn, and Jason. But we look forward to seeing you guys again for the fourth final of the Microsoft Excel South African Championships. Yeah.
I'm looking forward to it. And thank you to all three of you for all the work you do. Steyn, thank you for the case. I mean, if it took long for us to read it, I'm sure it took long for you to write it and keep everything in sync and everything. So yeah, thank you, all three of you, for all the effort you put in for the whole local chapter. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Michael. Much appreciated. Cool. Thanks. Take care.
Cool.
Cheers, guys.